Okay, so welcome. Thank you for joining us, especially Holly from down in Florida. Holly is with us tonight. She is the director of a homeschool, or was the director of the homeschool enrichment program called Literally Intervention Therapy, Inc., or Lit First. She is also a certified academic language therapist, which means she works with students who are struggling readers. Holly has been teaching for many years. She has assisted with 5 charter school startups in our area, and a few years ago, she was a co-founder of the new Summit Charter Academy. Her teaching experience includes homeschooling, charter schools, private schools, and mainstream public schools. In addition to instructing her own 5 children, Holly has taught gifted children, struggling students, and everyone in between. She has enjoyed teaching preschool, elementary, high school, and college students. Since the beginning of her career, Holly has been interested in helping students who struggled with reading. After receiving a master's in curriculum and instruction, she was later trained as a reading specialist and is now a certified academic language therapist. She loves to see reading progress in the students she supports and to come alongside families of those students. In addition, Holly loves to assist teachers in reading instruction. She has been providing individual and group reading therapy for over 12 years. For her, each student is a unique person with an individual strength and challenges. It is up to the teachers, Holly believes, to figure out how that student learns best and to deliver the appropriate instruction. One of Holly's primary educational beliefs is that parents have both the ultimate right and responsibility for training of their children. Schools exist, therefore, to support parents in this most honorable and significant task. Her belief that parents are the primary educators of their children makes her a natural advocate for dyslexic-type students. On a personal note, Holly has been married to Rick, a Colorado Springs realtor, for over 22 years. They have 5 grown children and 10 grandchildren. Holly, Rick, and their family moved here from Northern California 33 years ago. They continue to enjoy the beauty and the people of a new area, Florida, which she has been there for 3 weeks. And above else, Holly's family is her greatest joy. Holly enjoys spending her free time reading, knitting, gardening, and most of all, she is seeking opportunities to be with her family. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome you, Holly. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with Parents Challenge.
Well, thank you. And I'll update that. My husband and I just celebrated 43 year, years of being married,
Whoa,
and we have 5 kids and 10 grandkids so far.
that's so great.
So I am thrilled to be with you tonight. And here in Florida, we're enjoying 80-degree days so far. So lots of fun, a little bit different than Colorado. I would like to say hello to Fidera. Fidera, I don't know if you remember me or understand me, but I had Blaze. I was his teacher for a while. Do you remember that? Yes. So good to see you. Well,
Yes.
I think it's wonderful that you all are interested in how to support your children with reading. So I'm going to give you a couple of things just to keep in mind as we chat together. And I'd like to make it a chat that we all participate in. So I will go through the outline that was sent to you. However, if you have a question, the 2 ladies that are helping here, Tanya and Savannah, will let me know. And I'm really willing, in fact, I really would like to take your questions as we go along. So if I'm chatting along, which I tend to do at a good pace, and you have a question, please raise your hand or let them know or do something in the chat box or whatever, because I think the best learning is when we can all chat together. I want to start by helping you learn things that I didn't know and I've learned along the way. So we've got learning to read and we've got learning to talk. Learning to talk is inborn. God made us with an innate ability to be able to talk, but not so with reading. And so reading is a relatively new um, it's a relatively new skill and the written language. And so it has to be formally taught. In other words, you can't just open a book and have somebody naturally read. They have to learn the skills. And that's where the tricky stuff comes in. So if you think of learning to read as kind of a pyramid, the most bottom, widest base area is oral language. And you probably won't hear this from many people who talk to you about how to help your child with reading. But I want to spend a significant amount of our time tonight talking about oral language because it is the base of learning to read. And if when a child has a weak oral language base for whatever reason, there's probably going to be struggles in learning to read. So let's talk about that a little bit. So when your child hears you, they will naturally pick up things. They wouldn't be able to explain it to you, but they naturally pick up things like phrasing, expression, sentences, vocabulary. So you're really presenting your child with quite a bit of information before they ever see a written word. What your job is as a job, what your privilege is as a parent, is to talk to your child and try to use what I call rich language. So rich language would be, and even little kids are able to handle this. Um, instead of calling something, for instance, a mountain, you could use other words for a mountain, like a certain kind of mountain is called a mesa. Also, there is a hill. And so you can use different vocabulary, different language, make it richer. We often think of younger children, and I taught kindergarten for most of my career, and I taught for about 43 years. Um, we used to think that we needed to dumb down our language for younger children. And in fact, research says exactly the opposite. When younger children hear richer vocabulary, and you explain it and you show them examples or pictures, they are able to understand, and that adds to their own personal library, their mental library, of things that they can use when they learn to read. So it's really important that you talk to your child. So I'm going to say this, and some of you, I'm okay if you don't agree with this or you don't like it that I said this, but there is a tendency these days for parents to put their little ones, their children of all ages, on an electronic device and for to keep them busy, like an electronic babysitter. And the thing is, it works. It keeps them occupied. But what the child is missing out on is significant. They're missing out on what you can give them just by talking to them, even before they're born. If you know somebody who's pregnant, start talking to the child before they're ever born. They actually will pick up things in utero, but especially after they're born, talk to your babies. And you don't have to dumb it down or use baby talk. We naturally, our voices go a little bit higher when we talk to a baby, which is fine because that's how they hear. But use some language that they may not understand yet. But talk to your child. I can't tell you how important this is and how easy it is to naturally neglect. Talk to your child. The greatest example I have, I think, of the phones versus other things. I was waiting for a doctor's appointment, and a lady came in with three children, and I thought, I'll bet you she gets out phones for them, so they'll be quiet because we have to be quiet in the doctor's office. And she pulled out this beautiful basket of coloring books, um, reading books and crayons, and her children were busy coloring and reading. And she put her youngest on her lap and she was reading quietly to him. And I thought, this lady gets it. This mom really gets it. So, yes, phones work for keeping your child quiet, but there are better ways and certainly better for their brains. And so putting books in front of them, even if they can't read, children forever, since there have been books, and reading love to peruse books, even though they can't read them. And you've seen that as parents. So take advantage of that. Give your children, go to the library and get your children books so you have them like this wonderful mom. But don't forget to just talk, and we'll talk about discuss some different ideas for doing that. Um, whenever you present something that they maybe a word that they haven't heard before, you want to be sure to expound on that. So if you're introducing a word that they've never heard before, you can give its definition, you can use it in a sentence, you can give examples, and then in the next 2 weeks, use it in your conversation. That's how kids learn vocabulary, and that's how they learn this rich language that we're talking about. Um, Nearly 60% of words in English have multiple meanings. We call those homophones or homonyms. So if you look at, if I said the word pear to you, and if your child doesn't know how to read, you can use the word pear orally with them, and they're going to have to figure out, does this mean the fruit? That's a pear. Does this mean my pair of shoes that I have to learn how to tie? There's some other meanings of pair. We can pare down on something. And so it's a great idea, not formally, just informally, whenever you come across a word that might be a homonym, explain it to your child and the different definitions, and have fun with it. If the word is PAIR and you're talking about your shoes, you can kind of be silly with your children and say, well, we wouldn't have a PEAR of shoes, right? A fruit shoes, that's something completely different. But if you do that, explain it and also give some visual examples. Research shows that children, we all really understand more if there's some kind of picture or visual associated with it. So that's a good thing to stick in your oral language. Talk about words that might have multiple meanings. A good place to do this, there are a couple of good places. One is in the car, because don't we as parents spend a lot of time in the car picking up kids, waiting in carpool lines, you name it. So use that time to talk to your child. That is a very easy time. And we'll talk a little bit about questions too. Um, but use the time around the dinner table. There's a lot of research, unfortunately, that shows that families are spending less and less time together at the dinner table, and everybody's off doing important things, and including mom and dad, right? So try, as a good parent, I know you want to be, try to set several days a week where it's time at the table together, everybody's there. And I call this PYP, park your phone. Whoever has a phone, have a little basket. Everybody parks their phone for an hour while you eat and while you talk. The dinner conversations are so fun because you can ask questions. And I actually worked at a school for several years in Colorado Springs where the teachers, we had lunch with our children 2 or 3 times a week. And it was a very purposeful conversation. So we had a question of the day. So there are open-ended questions and there are closed questions. Closed questions you're familiar with because you probably hear it from your kids all the time, especially if you have teenagers. So, what happened at school today? Nothing. How was your day? Good. It doesn't get a lot of conversation going, right? But if you ask open-ended questions, what was your favorite thing about today? Tell me something you learned today. What happened at recess? These are open ended, so there's no one set answer. It causes the children to have to think and articulate their thoughts, which is really, really good for their language development. And so there are lots and lots of sites. You can look up Google online dinner questions for children or something like that. If you were invisible for one day, what would you do? If you could be any superhero, which one would you be and why? If you could travel anywhere, tell me where and why. And of course, what is your favorite? Or if you're reading a book, you're done with the book, you can ask. So a good open-ended question is, so if you could write a different ending to this story, what would it be? If you could be one of the characters in the book, which one? Which one do you relate to? Why do you relate to them? So that those are ideas of open-ended questions. So as you're talking to your children and with your family at dinner, you can ask these questions. We used to play just a high-low game. Tell me the high of the day. What was the best thing that happened? We try to spend more time on that than the lows because they always have lows. But sometimes children need to talk about the worst thing that happened, not to dwell there, but to discuss those. But so you're developing language as you're in your child as you're speaking to them. Um, another real benefit of doing this kind of open-ended questions, what we did in our classrooms when we had lunch with our kids is I asked the first question of the child, if you're invisible for a day, what would you do? And then they answered it. And then the child had to take three questions from other children. Well, guess what? The other kids have to listen. Wow, what a good skill, right? For everybody, all of us to develop good listening skills. They had to listen so that they could ask a question about the child's answer. That child, after the three questions, would then turn to a buddy, in this case, another one of your family members, ask the same question. And on it goes. And there are some really funny, interesting discussions, I promise, that you will have if you do this at your dinner table. And be creative. After a while, when we just did our high lows with my kids growing up, if we didn't do it, they would call us on the carpet on it. They would say, "Hey, we forgot to do the game," right? They will learn to love it. So, talking to your child, this um, oral language is so important. Before your child ever sees a word, a written word, that oral language, you can start from the minute they're born. I'm going to pause right now. And what questions? And I saw somebody maybe had a comment of an idea, and I'd love to use it for you to speak to the group. Anything you want to say or comment about or disagree with or whatever, with a presentation of oral language as a precursor to your child's reading.
Okay, inside the chat, we actually had a few things that people were asking. Um, they were asking about audiobooks. I'm having issues with my videos. What are your thoughts on audiobooks?
So I think audiobooks are great. They don't take the place of a parent or a family member reading to a child. They are a good addition, but there is something on several levels so special about a parent or family member reading to a child. It's my friend who was a librarian for years said that it creates a circle. You have your child on your lap or next to you, and you have this book in front of you, and it's like this intimate circle of the three of you. So I think audiobooks are wonderful, especially those children who may be older and are struggling with reading, to comprehend reading or the big words or whatever. We'll talk a little bit about struggles with reading later, but it should never take the place. Never take the place because those of you who have older kids, or I can tell you because my kids are all grown up, the time that you have with your child is like the blink of an eye, and take advantage every moment that you can muster to read to your kids. There's nothing like it, I promise. But good question. What else, Tanya, do we have?
The only other thing we have in here is someone said we have a book that stays on the kitchen table called Dinner Table Devos. It's a great one with questions to spark conversation. Even my 3-year-old stays engaged and involved. Highly recommend.
Nice. Okay, maybe we could put the name and author of that book if it's not in the chat already. That's great. Thank you for
Could
doing
you
that.
do, Taylor, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Okay, and please feel free if we move on to something and your mind is still back with oral language, please interrupt. Please post your question. We'd love to talk about it. Let's move on to actually reading to your children. Okay, so more than just language, but actually reading to them. Again, it adds to their oral language. So I have parents all the time say, how do I know what level of book to read to my child? And one of the obvious answers is what age is your child, right? But let me give you this in general. A child can comprehend, orally comprehend, and understand at a level higher than what they can read. So if you want to read The Wizard of Oz, if you want to read to a preschooler Little House on the Prairie books, or even Frog and Toad, and your child is not able to read, but those books themselves do it. And again, the reason is they're getting rich language and that they would not necessarily struggling with how to read those words. So always read to your child at a level higher. And I know families that they have teenagers and they have toddlers. And so they will choose a book that is interesting enough for the teen, but also can keep the toddler. It's amazing the little ones, what they'll be interested in. Also, toddlers are so cute. Little ones, the youngest, they want to be like big brother and sister. So they will pretend like they understand, even if they don't, but they will be picking up some things. So that's kind of a cool thing too. Um, Another thing is, and let me just talk about what is a good book. And I'm not going to tell you what book to read and what not to read, but here's some thoughts for you as responsible parents. A good book should have illustrations that capture the imaginations. And so good books often will have colorful, artistic illustrations that capture the child's interest and their imagination. They should include rich vocabulary. So watch that. If you just go to the library and open a book and it looks like it's maybe being dumbed down, that's not something that's going to help your child's brain. So you want something with rich. I would say a classic. And let me tell you what I mean by a classic. I don't mean Homer. What I mean by a classic is a book that's been around for a long time and stood the test of time. Little House on the Prairie, great example. Um, there are little children's books that are picture books that have just are so wonderful. Blueberries for Sal. I mean, there's so many that have been around for a long time. That's not to say that current books are not good, because that's not the case either. But make sure they have good illustrations and they've stood the test of time, at least some of those books. Some of you might have some books that you had when you were a child and you saved them. Oh, that's so awesome. Read those to your kids, they will become their favorites. I will never forget my mom a long time ago read One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. Of course, Dr. Seuss gave me, when I got married, she gave me the book. It's very tattered, but now my daughter has it. My granddaughter reads it to her mom. So those are fun books. And by the way, Dr. Seuss, even though it's silly talk, some of his words, they're really good for children to hear because he does so much alliteration and rhyming, and children need to hear that. So they're good books. Don't throw them out because they don't disqualify them because they're often very simple. Um, as your child does learn to read, you can do what I call back and forth reading, which is parent, I'll read a page, then the next page, child, you read it. I'll read a page, you read a page. Especially for students who may be struggling or find reading cumbersome, that's a nice way to lighten the load. And also, again, sometimes the kids will catch the parent reading a word wrong, heaven forbid, but it could happen. But it's a lot of fun to go back and forth, and it just kind of mixes things up to make it more interesting. There is a book, and it's on the last page of your supply list, your recommendations, and the author is Jim Trelease, And Jim Trelease wrote a book quite a while ago, but he has revised versions. But it's called the Read Aloud Handbook, and I just think it's phenomenal. I read it a long time ago when I was teaching, and also keep rereading it. But he goes into all kinds of things that happen to a child's brain when you read to them. It's incredible. And don't stop reading to them just because they're a teenager. And believe that's the book where he starts the first chapter. He starts with a story about his college age daughter before she goes off to college. He sits her on the bed before they take off for college and he reads to her. So just because your child gets older, and they will most likely say, don't read to me anymore, I can read this, or whatever it is they say, it's a really special time if you can keep that up through their teenage years. What questions or comments do you have about reading to your child?
Jamie, would you like to share yours? I can actually say it. She wrote it in the chat. She said she enjoys reading to her children, but not as much as I enjoy them reading to me. When they read to me, I have the opportunity for them to ask me pronunciation or the meaning of a word, as opposed to me reading and them listening. Even my high schooler will read, whether it's homework or a meme.
Good, nice. And so there really needs to be both, right? Reading to and your child reading to you. I looked at some research that talks about how to make a child's, when you read to a child, how to make it more effective, I guess I would say. And it was interesting. They said if you can ask questions after you read, that helps the child's comprehension, so they understanding and remembering what happened in the story. And again, open-ended questions. But um, after you read a chapter or something, before you go on to the next chapter, like let's talk about what happened during that chapter. What do you think about the way that character reacted? Or again, which character do you relate to, or what do you, let's predict. That's a great skill for children's brains. What do you think is going to happen in the next chapter? So things like that, if you can ask questions, there's more understanding and more comprehension than if you simply read the whole book, just front cover to back cover. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing too. Anything else about reading to your child? By the
I
way, for somebody who is bilingual, Federa, reading to your child in their native language is really good. In addition to your child at school, like Blaze hearing English, he will hear at home his native language. So read to him in whatever African language, I don't know what it is that you speak. Yes, so bilingual kids, that's really important as well. Anything else at this point? I want to move on. I want to talk about helping your child by creating a literacy rich environment at home. And what does that mean? So, the children are watching us parents all the time, watching, 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 no matter how. Okay, I see that question. And I will get to it in a second. Thank you for it. Um, they're always watching us. So a couple of ideas for creating an environment where kids really know that the family theme is reading, right? So talk to the child about something you're reading. I'm reading an really interesting book. Please, parents, be so careful with this, of course. You want to be appropriate, right? So read something that's honorable, good, clean, that you can share with their child. Let the child see your library. We've always had bookcases out in our family room and also in a child's room. There's nothing that a child is so proud of as their own bookshelf with their own library books or own personal books on it. And again, you're sending a message. Reading books and literacy is really, really important. Um, you can do family reading nights. We used to do those once a week. A lot of families have a movie night, and so much fun with the popcorn. We'll set apart another night and do a reading night. Everybody reads their own book. So instead of reading to your child, if your child can read, everybody has their own book they're reading and then have popcorn. So that is a fun, fun tradition. Also, in the car, when you are going on a road trip, make sure your child, if they don't get car sick and they can read in the car, make sure they bring their own library of books, a few books. Again, that you're sending a message that they reading is very, very important, and it's what we do as a family. It's what we do. Um, Parents need to see their children, or excuse me, children need to see their parents read. Yes, great, Jamie. That's awesome. Read to them in another language. That's good. Um, so you can take we homeschool for a while. So a family, what we would call a family field trip. We would go to a museum or a park, or one time when we lived in California, we went to go see Mount Shasta. And we made that a time with lots of oral language, but we also read books about things before we went or after we went. So that's another way you can incorporate this family time. And I know it's hard because our children these days are in at least one sport and usually play at least one musical instrument. And I just know there's a lot going on in your families. And what I'm asking you to do is to carve out time for books and literacy. And it may have to be at the expense of something else. And you can have a season of soccer, and the next season, maybe no soccer, and maybe do some different things to develop your family literacy. So I realize that it's not my choice, it's your choice, but do at least consider that. Um, my daughter, who homeschools in Fort Collins, every Monday, her husband is a police officer, and every Monday it's his day off, and they do a family library trip. And they've been doing it since the kids were teeny tiny. It is quite the occasion. They basically make a whole day out of it. And dad gets books, and mom gets her books, and the children each get books. And every week or two they go and they get a bunch of books, and then they have lunch together, and then they all spend a time at home with their new, and of course the kids are all excited about their new library books to read. So you can do that. That's another idea. Um, you can also make good use of your library, or your car time by playing games that are pre-reading games. We used to just play, let's do the ABC games. Who's the first one to find a license plate that starts with an A? What's the next letter of the alphabet? B. Who can find that? Anything you can incorporate in that time in the car would be really good. Are there any questions about what I've said? I've seen comments, and I'm sorry I'm not reading them all. The value of learning a foreign language, I think, was one question. So the research shows that there is a prime age when children best learn a foreign language. That is not to say they can't learn them later. And we adults are supposed to do that too to help our brains. But the prime age is actually preschool through about age 8. And so when I was a kid, I'm the third of 4 kids, and my mom used to take us when some of us were in school, and I was not. I was 4, and I would take Spanish lessons after school. And man, I think that I learned so much from that. I couldn't read anything, of course, but I learned so much language. So yes, if a child can learn a foreign language, that would be amazing. There is one caveat with that I'll throw out just right now. If your child is dyslexic, if they're showing dyslexic tendencies, and I'm going to talk about that later, they're really, really struggling with English, they probably should not have the additional brain burden of another language, unless, they had one growing up. But research says that if a child struggles with reading in their own language, they should not. It would be best not to. And a child may want to, but it's just I've seen dyslexic after dyslexic kids who try it, they want it so bad, and they are just overwhelmed with it's just too much. And so, other than that case, right, then I think it is a really good idea for children to learn another language. It really is additional pathways to the brain. Other questions? All right. So, what happens? We talked about oral language, how important it is as a foundation. So, what happens after 6 years old when your child is actually in school and learning to read? Well, I know this is easier said than done, but I'm going to throw it out there. If you can spend some time volunteering in your classroom, there is nothing like seeing what goes on in your child's classroom. You can see other children. If you're concerned that your child is behind in reading, maybe go to your classroom, the child's classroom, and see how the other kids are doing. If you're homeschooling, um, see how your child does in reading as compared to, and of course your children are all different, of course. I always say, it'd be too easy if God gave us kids that are all the same. Is your child struggling with something that your older child did not, or your older child struggling with something that your younger child is getting very, very quickly? If you can really be an eyewitness to the learning that's going on, homeschooling or especially in the classroom, do that. I would say pay attention to a child's homework. I know that we moms are, we need 8 hands and 3 heads because we're trying to help a child with homework while we're cooking, while we're taking care of our toddler, right? But do try to pay attention to what's going on with your child's homework. A child who has 10 minutes of homework in any subject and is taking an hour or two, take note of that. Something is going on. And um, I know that my children, when they got older, would share with me, since I was a teacher, they would say, mom's tired at the end of the day. She gave the office, so to speak, and so they were hesitant to ask me for help. And boy, as soon as my daughter said that, I said, no, I don't care what I look like, how tired I look, please ask me for help. So encourage your child. There is nothing wrong with asking for help when a child is doing his homework. And it's also a good way for you to see what kind of homework your child is required or being asked to do. The vocabulary piece is really interesting. So before a child can read, they pick up vocabulary, as you now know from listening to this talk, through oral language. But once a child is in school and starts to read, their new vocabulary comes through books. So that's a really big shift. And that's another reason why you want books that are rich, have rich vocabulary. So you're still talking to your child, but now they're picking up new vocabulary through library books or through studying Greek mythology at school or whatever it is. So just be aware of that vocabulary shift. So there's something called just distributed learning, and I think it's valuable for both we parents who have kids in school and those of us who are homeschooling. Distributed learning is when you spread out learning so that child brain has time to absorb it before they take on new information. And I'll give you an example. If your child, maybe I work with some parents whose child is struggling with reading, and so I gave them some things to do. So they said, well, can we do this all at once? In other words, can I work with my child with these intervention helps things for an hour a day? And I would say, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Instead, do distributive. What that means is you distribute the learning. I would rather you do 10 minutes of learning and teaching 5 times a day, because the human brain, especially a child's brain, they can only take in so much information at one time. They need chance for that to soak in their brain, their gray matter. I'm sure that you have been in a situation somewhere where you've just been in overload and you've been listening to a lecture for so long. And I know for me, my brain just naturally shuts off, and I can't take anymore. So think about that for your child. So distribute the learning, even if they are doing homework after school. Give them a snack, have them do a little bit of homework, take a break, a little bit of homework, have dinner, a little bit of homework before bedtime. That, the research shows, is so much better for a child's brain than if you try to. And I think it's natural for us as parents, like, let's get this done. Let's work on this till it's finished. Yes, and that is good for the parents, and I think for home life in general. But honestly, for the child's brain, if you can distribute that learning over 2, 3 more sessions, it's actually better for your student. And obviously, I'm giving you suggestions, and you have to do what's best for your family, right? Some things just will not work. But Holly, you don't know my situation. You're so right. I don't. And I trust you parents know your kids better than I. So you will do what's best for your child. Things to just put in your brain to think about. Any questions about that? Comments? All right. So what do I do? This is how I put it on your outline. What to do when you don't know what to do? Is my child behind in reading? The greatest fear. Um, I interviewed some homeschool moms a few years ago before I started doing this homeschool entity thing I did. Um, the greatest fear is that I won't be able to teach reading well, and then my child will get behind. That's the greatest fear. I don't, I understand it, but I also think, lighten up on yourself, please. But there are kids who get behind. So let me give you some statistics. Over half of the inmates in institutions and, well, mental institutions and jails, prisons, are illiterate, functionally illiterate. So it's a problem, right? It is a problem. So the statistic is approximately 1 out of 5 students, 1 out of 5. That means kids through adults have struggled with reading and likely have dyslexia, whether it's ever been evaluated or not. So that means if you take a group of, any group of even adults, if you have a group of 10, there's likely a couple that will say, you know what, I struggled with reading when I was a kid. Or they may have some horrible stories, which I've heard lots of stories from adults about just a terrible, terrible time. They hate school. Okay. Stacy, keep asking me that questions because I want to address it, okay? Um, so, so everybody, how do you know? How do you know if your child? So when I first started teaching many years ago, I taught kindergarten and first grade mostly. I would tell parents, because this is what I heard, I would tell parents, just give them the gift of time. They don't know their ABCs in first grade. Ah, don't worry, they'll catch up. That was wrong. It was wrong. I didn't know any better. I wasn't educated in that area. And the truth is, if they're behind in kindergarten, they're going to be behind in third grade unless they get help. If they're behind in third and fourth grade, there is a great chance they may not graduate high school. And that's scary. That is just scary. The good news is there is help. There is help available. There's absolutely help available for these children. Um, so I'm going to share with you, if I can. Let me get my glasses on so I can read here. I'm going to share with you. Hold on. I'm going to wake up my mouse here. There we go. So this is early identification, and this was sent to you too. It's by a guy named Hugh Katz, who's sorry, you probably can't see it, can you? So I am going to, let me try it again. Okay. All right. So I'm going to see if this works. Okay. Hold on 1 minute. Of course it,
Can I help you, Holly?
I mean, I think I just need to pull it up again. Here we go. Okay. Can you see that?
No.
Okay.
So share your
Oh, wow.
screen. If you go to the more little button, the little circle at the bottom that says more, and then share your
Yes.
screen.
Okay. I don't have share screen there, but I do have a share down here, and I'm not sure why it's okay. I had it pulled up and then I think well, you should have received a copy of it, but it's a checklist from somebody named Hugh Katz, who's done just a ton of research. Let's see if I can find it again.
I just found it. I can share it.
Okay, okay, awesome. Ask people who know. Okay, there we go. Oof. Oh, Stacy. Oh, so sorry. That's horrible. Okay, so this is for parents, okay? And just for things for you to look at, okay? So there are some different things there. So take that and see if any of that you think applies to your child, okay? So there's all kinds of different things there. I'm going to, let's see, I think we can take that off, Tanya. But that should have been a handout that you got. So that's a really interesting one. A lot of moms are the heroes in my mind because they're always the ones that the antennae go up and they say something's just not right here for whatever reason. Okay, so to test or not to test, that's the question. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk about testing for a little bit here. Okay, so there are people who will say, I can test your child. And excuse me 1 second. Right, little allergies here. There are people who say, I can talk to your child for an hour or two and I can tell you if they're dyslexic. So I would say that is not valid. What you want is somebody who will give a written test, a written test. It's actually not a test for dyslexia. It's a set of tests. There is no test for dyslexia. What there is, and I've done screenings before, and I gave 15 to 20 different subtests to identify a child if they have possibly, and I just did a screening, I didn't do a formal evaluation. So please be aware of anybody who says, I can talk to your child and in an hour and I you need to be equipped to have something if you go to school or homeschool. You need to be equipped to have a piece of paper with the test results on it. Okay, so please really, really beware of this. I know that there is a waiting list I can give you another place, Stacy, where you can try. I don't know what the cost is. It's not inexpensive. There are evaluations, which can tell you if your child is dyslexic, and there's also screening, and that's what I was doing. And those tell you if a child has dyslexic tendencies. Okay, so even a screening, usually a school will go, okay, that's enough to get them some special accommodations, they're called. And the name of the place, well, it's in your outline. It's called the acronym is it's CLLC, the initials, Colorado Learning, Colorado Literacy and Learning Center, and on Cheyenne Road or something. And I know that they will do formal evaluations. If you want a screening that tells you that your child likely has dyslexia, but maybe not for sure, I can give you the name. If you contact me after this is done or tomorrow, whatever, I can give you the name of somebody who does screenings in the Springs there. Be sure that you get something written, because when if you go to somebody and they say, I taught your child, I'm sure what I hear is dyslexia, then you go to your school's going to go, that's not enough to give your child a 504 or an IEP or any accommodations at all. Okay, so please beware of that. Okay, I want you to be wise with that. um, I know that children's hospitals always, it seems, always has a waiting list. That's just a thing. And if you can't get an evaluation, now let me talk about this. Some parents want the formal evaluation. They absolutely want to know my child is or is not dyslexic, or a screening. My child definitely has dyslexic tendencies, or they definitely don't. Other parents don't need an evaluation for whatever reason. They know in their gut what they know, and they will go to their school, or if they're homeschooling, they will make the necessary accommodations on their own without that. Whether you screen or don't screen, evaluate or don't evaluate, is really up to you. I will say most, like 90% of the parents that I work with, they want a screening or an evaluation. They want something in their hands. And you know what? As moms, we just want to know. I want to know. I want to know what's going on. And so it's your choice. It's absolutely your choice. Other parents I talk to, and they're in the minority, say, no way do we have the extra money to do that. I can't do that. I understand. I understand. So there is a choice there. But I just want you to be aware, please, if you go the screening evaluation, screening for dyslexia or an evaluation, go with somebody who can give you a written evaluation. I understand in the Springs now there are some neuropsychs, I don't know their names, that can do that, and they will give you a report. That's what you want, is a report. Okay. What, do you have questions about that? Comments? Oh, good question. Good question. What age? So the wonderful person who trained me is, um, she is quite the she is quite the expert on dyslexia. She said in kindergarten, how do you know if it's just a developmental thing? So even she says, wait. Um, I taught kindergarten and first grade for most of my years, and I let me say, what the research is showing, current research is showing, is as early as kindergarten and first grade, that kids can be tested. Here's what we've always done in education. Because I was an educator, we've always used the wait to fail model. The wait to fail model says we don't need to test a child till they're failing, so let's wait till they really fail at third and fourth grade, when the gap is like this. So in kindergarten, there's a gap maybe this big. First grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. And what that does to a child's self esteem and sense of worth is unbelievable. I have met, oh, so many students who will, out of their own mouth, tell you stories that would just make you cry about feeling they weren't enough. They had a teacher tell them they weren't trying hard enough. Had a parent insinuate they were not smart enough, which is not the case. Dyslexic students often have higher IQs than what we would consider non-dyslexic. Um, so a child, but if you wait to test a child, you will risk um, a real beating up of a child's self-esteem, and so you don't need to wait till they're failing big. You as a parent can do it. You can have them evaluated or screened. You don't have to wait. And I'll tell you what, it takes so much more time and intervention for a child in fourth grade who's behind than a child who's in first or second grade who's behind. And so there's no magic age, but I would say starting in first grade, and there's research that says that um, as young as first grade, a child knows he's behind other kids. Isn't that amazing in reading? As young as first grade, they know. Dyslexia is hereditary. There is a hereditary tendency. So if there's a parent who has dyslexia, whether it's ever been evaluated or not, 50%, 50, that one of their children is going to be dyslexic. Most of the kiddos that I work with have a dyslexic sibling too, if there's a number of them. Like out of 4 kids, 2 will be dyslexic. Um, when I talk to parents, one of my questionnaire I send out before I screen a child is I will ask, has anybody in your family ever talked about struggles with reading? And so dyslexia has been around as a term for many, many years. And that's right, Katie. Yes. Um, but we haven't really gotten it into the schools. There's a lag. There's been a lag behind the research transferring to the classroom. There's been a real lag. And so you might have an Uncle Tim who never, yeah, I'm not dyslexic. They didn't use those terms when I was a kid. But he might say, but man, I hated school. I hated reading. When the teacher asked me to read out loud, I pretend like I had to go in the bathroom. Um, so if you ask questions, it might be a grandmother, it might be a cousin. Almost always you'll find somebody, not always, but there is an inherited tendencies. And let me tell you what happens to these children who go through the system without teachers aware, the school aware, sometimes even the parent. So here's what happens. And I'm going to say this because I've experienced kids like this. I had a fourth grade girl at a school I was working with. Her mom did not have her evaluated. She read the book, which I suggest um, in your outline here, Overcoming Dyslexia, and she was just sure her daughter is dyslexic. I think she was too. Never had her evaluated, but her daughter was reading at a kindergarten level in fourth grade. And so the mom started, as I got to know them, the mom started sharing when she was in first and second grade on the way to school, most days a week, she would throw up in the car. She would make herself sick in the car because she did not want to go to school. She hated school. And her mom told me, I really think it's because she knew she was so far behind and she just couldn't read. She just couldn't. I've had boys who couldn't read, who struggle with reading, and I've had the teachers tell me, you know what, I don't get it because they're nice kids, but they become the class clown. Well, yeah, they do because they're so smart. They know they're behind, but they intuitively know that they can deflect from their own reading from the teacher asking them to read if they're the class clown. And it's not that there are behavior problems, it's that they can't read and they need help with their reading. Like I said, I've had kids when you ask them, now we're going to have a reading time and we're going to play a game called popcorn. So I'm going to call on somebody. When they're done, they call on somebody else to read. Well, that's absolutely petrifying and paralyzing for a kid who is struggling with reading because they know they can't and they're just sitting there, not me, not me, not me. I've had kids, I have to go to the bathroom now. I have to go to the bathroom. Or I feel sick. Can I go to the nurse? I've seen that a lot with kids who struggle with reading. My point is these kids are smart. They're precious. They're absolutely precious. I just love them. We need to give them the chance to show us that they can do it, but they can only do it with the right kind of help. And so if you have a 16-year-old sweet gal down the street who babysits for you, and she says, I'll read with your child. I know they're struggling with reading, but I'll read. You know what? Sweet thing. Have her babysit for you. That is not the kind of help your dyslexic type child needs to help with their reading. What they need is very specific. There are a handful, and not every reading program, but a handful of reading programs. They're intervention programs that are designed to help dyslexic students. They give the dyslexic child what they need. There's all these fancy words. They're explicit, they're intrinsic, they're sequential, all these different categories of, educationese, if you will. But it's not every program. So a lot of homeschoolers that I know, including my daughter, use All About Reading. All About Reading is great. It's phonics based. All of her kids learn to read fairly easily. I think it's a great program, but it's not enough for a dyslexic child. They need something additional. They need something specific to dyslexia. So I've just talked to so many parents who feel like they wasted so much money and so much time trying different things. If you get your child tested, they'll probably evaluate it formally. They'll probably, and even screened. They'll give you some ideas of good programs to use. I'm partial to one that I use because I I was trained probably in 5 different interventions, and one to me was head and shoulders above every of one of the others because it worked. I've seen it, and as an instructor, I loved it. As an interventionist, we call ourselves reading therapists. As a reading therapist, I could just relax and teach it and know that it worked. I trusted the curriculum because I've taught so many children with dyslexia and it works. A child who has dyslexia doesn't grow out of it. They're not cured. They have dyslexia their whole lives. But what these intervention programs do is they teach them how to learn their phonics, how to read words, all these things, spelling. And by the way, I have had parents say, oh, I think my child is dyslexic. Um, they can't read, but they can spell. Well, here's the way I was taught to look at that. Reading and spelling are two sides of the same coin. So even if your child can read, but they can't spell, that's going to catch up with them unless they get some help. And I don't want to be an alarmist here. I only want to provide you with information, and you, the parents, get to decide what to do with your own child. And God bless you, that's on you. You get to do that, right? And my job is to give you information, and yours, you know your child better than anyone else. Don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. Any school, any professional, you know your child better. You get to make that decision. But please, take these things to heart if this is the case. I will say almost, oh gosh, I would say 95% of the time a mom comes to me and says, I have a suspicion, and they go on to be screened by me or evaluated by somebody else. They were right. I will say that moms do have this, they have this gut that's usually right on. And so for spelling, I really recommend, so spelling is really a phonics problem. I will throw out one program, and again, there's a handful of good ones. The one I used for so many years is called Take Flight. And as a Take Flight therapist, I had to have 700 hours plus of training. So this is not a book that a parent can just pick up and, sorry, homeschool mom, sorry, you can't just pick it up and use it. You need to find a skilled, trained therapist. And it it teaches reading, something called phonemic awareness, which is the oral piece of language. So, like alliteration and rhyming. It teaches spelling rules. It teaches multiple word meanings. It teaches Greek and Latin roots, and it's approximately 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's not a small thing, and it's a commitment on new parents' part of time and money. I know, and I believe that some insurances, I don't know how or who, cover some of that expense. But so spelling, you can't what I'm saying is you can't isolate spelling from reading. They're really all together, and it's a phonics weakness. Real quick, reading happens on one side of your brain, on the left side of your brain. And what dyslexics do is they have a weakness there. And so they use both sides of the brain. And so it's not as efficient. And if you ever have experienced your child or somebody else's, maybe as a teacher, a dyslexic child at the end of the day is exhausted. They work 10 times harder than your child for whom reading is not an issue, because it's the way their brains are. There's nothing wrong with them. Their brains are just, God made them with a special brain. And so they're working really, really hard. And so what these good interventions do is they developed that. It doesn't look, but I'm pointing to my left side right now. The lab, they start building connections and everything in the reading part of the brain. So I hope that helps you. Do you have other questions? I know it's a lot. I am perfectly willing to answer any questions after, if you're like me. Once I get in my car and go home, or once I turn off my computer, I go, oh, shoot, I forgot to ask them. Please email me. It's just my first name dot last name at Gmail. I would be happy to field any questions. And let me end with this, because I was the director of a program through BOCES, ER BOCES, and it was called Literacy Intervention Therapy, and known as Lit First. And when we moved, I tried to shut that down, and a couple of wonderful ladies came in, and they are continuing Lit First. They're going to rename it as, I think it's called RISE, Rise, Reading Solutions, I think. Anyway, it's the same entity that I was director of, but it's going to be better. They're going to do it through BOCES, but they're not starting until next fall. So fall of 2026. And they will offer, as we did, um, reading therapy for a minimal amount, getting the state to pay for it. There is a way to do that. And so you parents are not going to be putting out thousands of dollars that you would with a private tutor. And let me say, some parents like the private tutor, they would rather pay the money for one-on-one. So it's small group, like 2 to 4 kids, and they're going to be doing that through BOCES next year. And if you want that information, I can give you the names of these wonderful ladies. Um, it's a great way to go, because you don't have to put out all the money, but they're still getting what they would get with the private tutor. We do use the Take Flight, so that is the reading intervention. So just let me know if you. I think I don't know if there's anybody that put that in the chat if you're interested, but okay. So sorry, Katie. So Katie, can you email me? Let me see if I can. Do they have my email address, Tanya?
I don't know if I have it.
They should have it, but I'll find it and put it in the chat.
Okay. It's just holly.benwaring@gmail. And I can tell you that Miss Federa here, her son was in our program, and he improved so much he graduated last spring, but he improved so much. We were so proud of him, Federa. He did such an amazing job. He worked so hard, but he improved so much. So it does work. It really does work. Jamie. So the resources, yes, I have some on, but I will make another one for you. And um, who would I get those to, Tanya?
If you want to, you can just email them to me and I can add
Okay.
them onto the resources
Okay.
or send them out to
Awesome.
all the families that are on this.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Thank you for being involved, parents. I listened to somebody in the last month, very wise person whom I respect so much, and he said, the best thing you can do with raising a child is pay attention. And I love that. Pay attention. Katie, do you have a question? Okay. No. Okay. Sorry.
Gail also had a hand up. I don't know if you meant to, Gail. Were you trying to get yourself unmuted or ask a question? You can also type it into the chat, Gail, if for some reason the audio is not coming through on your side.
Ooh,
I'm not sure. Gail, if you can hear me and you're just having troubles being heard, do you want to just raise your hand in front of your video, your camera, and then we'll know to wait. Otherwise, we're going to move on.
she said she just has problems with her
Okay, she
electronic.
doesn't have a question. Error managing Zoom. I have something to say really quick. Um, to moms, just as a word of encouragement. I'm dealing with one of my children who has it, and um, I think I've come through and in finding him, I realize that I probably have the same thing. And the thing that Holly was saying with Katie, you were asking about the spelling versus the reading, is they do go hand in hand. And I've always struggled with spelling, but I've worked my way around the reading part to where I was able to be a very excelling student, even though I probably definitely had it. There's other things that in those questions that she has in her handout that you can kind of look at and see. And it's like, oh, yeah, because typically if one of your children do, one of the parent, it's coming from one of the parents. And so it's not something to be afraid of nor be ashamed of, because really there's a lot of amazing people who have been dyslexic that are very successful in the world. So just keep being a advocate for your children and you'll do fine. So Holly, Katie just said, learning to read with dyslexia can be supported by songs because music activates both brain hemispheres, which help with memory, auditory processing, and phonemic awareness.
With singing music? Is that what she
What's that?
said?
Yeah, it's
Did she
supported by
say
songs because
songs?
music.
Yes, because music is a separate channel to the brain. So it can happen alongside. Yes, so definitely, definitely. Any other things? Thank you for being part of Parents Challenge. I think it's the best. I love it. Love the whole concept. And thank you for caring so much about your children that you would be willing to sit through these classes. I really appreciate it, and good for you. I really I applaud you for for being that parent.
I do have a small question. I substitute for my district right now because I'm trying to get my teaching degree because I want to be a teacher. And I think I want to do elementary school, like second or third grade. And I do see a lot of these kids not knowing how to read basic, basic things. And then our district changed our reading curriculum this year, where they're pushing it down more, like making, basically they want our kindergarteners to be fluently reading by the end of kindergarten, which doesn't seem to make sense to me since some of these other kids are struggling so hard. Are we just leaving them behind, or what would you recommend to like be able to help the older kids since the younger kids are going to have more than they did, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. So I think that all schools are under pressure to perform because of funding, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So there is pressure. Sorry. There is pressure to have children. The better they perform, the better they're, well, all that stuff. um, I taught kindergarten most of my years, and I don't think that fluently reading is, I mean, that's just my opinion. If a kindergartner can solidly, I mean, really know their alphabet letters and sounds, and they can read what we call sight words. So those are words like the, and ones that are very, very common that they can sound out, but they just know them just from looking at them quickly and without having to sound it out. If they can know those, then they will take off in first grade. I think it's a lot of pressure for a child. That's a lot of pressure for the teacher. But oh gosh, I have heard fellow kindergarten teachers read the parents the riot act about not working hard enough with their kids, and they're in kindergarten. So that's my opinion. take it for what you paid for it.
Yes, thank you. No,
I do. There are things that absolutely should be to mastery. Alphabet letters, sequence of alphabet, and the sounds that they make. Yes, if they don't have that, then there's a problem. Those sight words, there's lists online. They're called fry lists, and they're grouped by hundreds. And if a child in kindergarten really has mastered the first 50 to 75, they're in great shape to just soar in kindergarten. I mean, in first grade, sorry. But that's my opinion. You have to do, as a sub, you're going to have to follow lesson plans. I sub for years. And of course, as an employee of a school, you got to do what they say. So put that in your mind. These are children too. They're very capable, very capable. So thanks. That's a really good question. Good observation. Tanya, I'm going to let you end this whenever you feel like we're done.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else that they would ask about or on some logistics? Chat really quick. Sorry, I have little people doing in the chat. Okay, so you can stay on here, Holly, if you want to with us. You don't have to. We are going to do the drawing, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording if you're okay, Holly, with that.
Yeah. Everybody,
Let's
blessings
stop.
to you all, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Holly, for being with us.
Welcome.
Thank you, Holly.